We are here today to break down the NAR lawsuit settlement. So, if most of you have seen headlines, there's been a lot of sort of sensationalized headlines that are out there. And what I wanted to do was just take a minute to go over what the settlement was, how it may affect the industry, real estate in general, but also specifically, if you're looking to sell or looking to buy a home, how does it affect you individually? So for those of you who don't know, NAR is the National Association of Realtors. They've been recently sued for a couple of reasons. And to break that down, we're going to look at a couple of facts here. So the first thing is that there was a class action lawsuit claiming that there was a conspiracy to inflate commissions, and there was accusations of price fixing. Basically, what they said was the seller's agent and the buyer's agent and the real estate industry in general was colluding to keep commissions higher. What the NAR did was they settled for $418 million, and they agreed to pay that over the next 4 years. In addition to that, they agreed to certain changes within the industry. And I'd like to go over those so that people know exactly what historically was normal for real estate and what we can expect going forward, assuming that this is takes full effect in July as the settlement shakes out. So here's what has changed. The first thing is that, and these are the big ones, but no offer of buyer broker compensation is allowed anymore in MLS. That doesn't mean that the seller can't offer compensation to buyers or their agents. But the big change is that it's not in MLS, so it's not unilaterally guaranteed anymore. And it's part of the negotiation. So even if a seller offers compensation to the buyer or the buyer's agent, it has to be included and negotiated in each individual offer. Prior to that, if the seller offered compensation through the listing agent, that was unilaterally guaranteed regardless of the negotiation of price and terms within the contract. The other big change was that the buyer's agent and the broker need to negotiate the buyer's agent's fee and what they are going to do for that buyer prior to showing the house. Now, previously, as a buyer's agent or a listing agent, you would need to disclose the relationship that you intended to have with the buyer before going out. So I would say, hey, listen, thank you for calling on the listing. I represent the seller of this property. I'm happy to bring you out, but just so you're aware, my obligation is to the seller. So we would have to disclose that. But now, if a buyer calls an agent to see a home, whether it's the listing agent or a third-party buyer's agent, they need to have a conversation about how much that buyer's agent is going to charge and what services that buyer is going to offer. Now, this could be for one individual property. It could be for a month. It could be for 6 months. But they're going to have to negotiate very specifically how much the buyer's agent is going to receive in compensation and what services they're going to provide. So one thing that's interesting is that they very specifically, buyer's agents are not to be paid more than the pre-negotiated amount. So let's say that a buyer's agent is willing to take a flat fee or a 1% commission or something a bit lower. If the seller is offering 2.5% commission, which is somewhat standard in this industry, and the buyer's agent is working for a reduced commission, that's not going to allow that agent to just accept whatever the seller offers. That buyer's agent is contractually bound to accept no more than the pre-negotiated amount, which again, I think is great because it gives more transparency to buyers that are in the marketplace. Now, here's what's interesting. Here's some of the headlines that are not true, okay? 6% commission on buying and selling homes is gone. There might be areas of the country that are still 6%, but we've been well below that for a long time. I don't know what Barbara Corcoran is talking about, but there's not total confusion. This doesn't materially change the way real estate is done. It might adjust the way real estate agents are compensated, but we're still performing the same activities and duties that are out there. So this whole idea that they slash commissions and there's a huge shakeup. I do think that there's going to be some material changes within the industry, but these are all just sensationalized headlines. They're not, they don't represent what actually happened and changed and what we expect from the future of our industry. So let's break down specifically. If you're looking to sell a home or if you're considering selling over the next few years, here's some of the things that might change. So typically, a seller would pay one fee to their listing agent. Now, pre-negotiated with the seller, that listing agent would offer unilateral compensation to the buyer's agent. So, for example, if you were to take a 5% commission, we would typically share half of that commission with the buyer's agent. Now, basically what's going to happen is you will agree to one fee for the seller's agent and then a separate fee that's going to be paid directly from the seller to the buyer's agent or buyer at closing. So no longer does the listing agent collect all of the fees and then distribute them. Now what's going to happen is you're going to negotiate an individual fee with the seller side listing agent and a separate offer of compensation that's not unilaterally guaranteed, regardless of what you agree upon to advertise. Because again, you can still advertise buyer's agents' commissions and compensation to buyers, but it's not unilaterally guaranteed, which means that, again, it needs to be included within the offer when a buyer and buyer's agent presents an offer to a seller. The sellers and their agents, I mean, this is going to be big. This is how it changes, but they're going to need to discuss and evaluate buyer compensation on every single offer. So when we take, especially in this competitive environment, if we take a look at 6 or 8 or 10 offers on a property, which is common these days, now one of the criteria is going to be the compensation for the buyer or the buyer's agent. And that's going to affect how much the seller walks away with. So what this does is it makes that buyer's agent's commission part of the negotiable aspect of every individual offer. So it's going to just, it will complicate the offer process a little bit more. And that may work to the benefit of the seller. It may work to the benefit of an individual buyer, but that's going to be dependent on the competition level and what other offers present. So it just makes it a part of the negotiation. What's going to be critical, and you'll see this on both the buyers and the seller side, but as a listing agent, you have to have an extraordinarily strong knowledge and understanding of the market. What's going on? What are other buyers agents offering? What are buyers asking for as far as compensation? How much competition is there in the market? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Because make no mistake about it, sellers may be able to get away with offering less compensation or negotiate out compensation for buyer's agent in a strong seller's market. But if we shift and pivot to a buyer's market and all of a sudden there's a lot of inventory, that fee, again, when buyers have leverage, that fee is going to, the expectation is that it's going to be either built into the purchase price or the seller comes out of pocket with that money for their agent. So again, it really depends on the market. What's happening as far as norms? Are most houses listed with buyer's agent compensation? Are most houses not listed with compensation? The agent's role in educating the seller is going to become that much more critical about this one individual aspect. So how do we look at it for changes for the buyer? I think the biggest change is that buyers are going to need to start their search earlier in the process. Listen, sellers always start their realtor search very, very early. We interview with people months, sometimes 6 or 12 months before a seller is ready, to start preparing them to get ready for the market so that they can interview 2 or 3 or 4 agents so that they make sure they have the right fit. I think that that's going to become the norm for buyers, because if buyers are now going to potentially become responsible for the compensation for their agent, they're going to want to be a lot more discerning about which agent that they choose. And if they're just searching Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, Homes.com, if they're just searching by themselves and then they call last minute to go and see a property, they might not have time to evaluate what other agents might be offering as far as fees and services. And they might go with the first one that they get introduced to, and that might not be the best value for their money. So the bottom line is they're going to want to interview agents to match what they compensate or offer to compensate their buyer's agent with the value that that agent provides. And I think that there's going to be a range of services from new agents that perhaps will offer less value, but will charge less. And then there's going to be really experienced agents that are going to request more compensation, but they offer more value in terms of their knowledge and skill set and their negotiation abilities, all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be critical to interview agents, discuss offer negotiation strategy and the options. This is going to be really important for buyers to understand and ask their agent how they advise them to negotiate. Because the big shift for buyers is that when they hire an agent, typically in the past, most agents wouldn't sign an agreement that says you owe me a certain amount. Now here at the Esposito Realty Group, we do, but most times, most real estate agents will just bring a buyer out and they'll take compensation from the listing agent on whatever home that buyer ends up buying. Now, if that seller doesn't offer compensation by virtue of the contract that the buyer signs, that buyer might be responsible to come up out of pocket or at closing with the fee for that buyer's agent. So how does that get solved? Because you can, as a good real estate agent, you can negotiate it into the contract. You can build it on top of the purchase price, depending on the lender options and what they offer and what the sellers are willing to do and where the appraised value is. Like, what's the strategy so that the buyer can be competitive on an offer and get the house, but then hopefully not have to come out of pocket for the compensation to their agent? There are strategies that work. And there are relationships that matter. And I think strong buyer's agents, knowledgeable agents in the marketplace will be able to guide people. And that's going to be a critical step to asking, what do you plan on doing to get me the house, but also hopefully not put me on the hook for your fee? Again, it goes back to a really strong knowledge of the market will be critical. So here's what I forecast. I think the biggest benefit right now is going to be that there's going to be an increased professionalism and value that agents provide to their clients. Now that a buyer's agent, because like, make no mistake, in the current marketplace right now, a buyer, when they hire a buyer's agent or start working with a buyer's agent, because they haven't been on the hook to compensate the buyer's agent, they've been a lot less discerning about what that agent can do and the skill set and the knowledge, because they're not on the hook for that payment. But now that they potentially are, I think what you're going to see is that buyer's agents, which represent 80% of all real estate agents, are very buyer heavy, because it is a historically less skilled activity than listing a property and, again, interviewing against multiple other agents to have a seller choose you versus the competition. So the vast majority of real estate agents are really buyer heavy. Now that they're going to have to prove their value just like listing agents do, representing a seller, now that they're going to have to compete, I think what you're going to see is that buyers are going to need to increase the value that they provide to their clients. And I think overall, I think it's going to be a net positive for the industry and for clients. It's definitely going to provide more transparency about agent compensation. Okay, you're going to know as a seller and a buyer exactly what's going on. It has to be a written agreement now on the buy side as well as the sell side. So assuming that you have a knowledgeable real estate agent that you hire, there's going to be a lot more transparency to it. I also think that this is going to push both the real estate industry and the mortgage industry to innovate. I think you're going to see, again, a lot more value coming from the average real estate agent. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a ton of extraordinarily qualified real estate agents that provide overwhelming value both on the listing side and on the sales side, representing both buyers and sellers. There's a lot of innovation that's taken place over the past 5-10 years. It's just that the majority of real estate agents don't put the time and effort into either learning the skill or applying that value because they haven't needed to. And now that it's going to be required, I think what we're going to see is a ton of innovation. You may end up seeing the mortgage industry come out with lending products that will roll buyers agents compensation into the mortgage on top of whatever they pay in order for them to not come out of pocket. So I think that there's going to be some innovation that's going to really help, again, push this real estate industry forward, but also materially affect and benefit the consumer. So again, the bottom line is that I believe that this is a net benefit to both the industry and to the buyers and the consumers overall. If you have any specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out. All of my information is in the profile below. You guys can certainly just give me a call, schedule an appointment, follow me on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, obviously YouTube. If you want more real estate information, if you like the content that you see, subscribe below. We'll stay in touch with you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.